Nathaniel, welcome aboard to the show. So happy to have you today.
Thank you, Ari. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello, all of the Story Samurai listeners.
So when you and you'll tell the story, but my curiosity is when you started this bicycle ride, did you know it was going to be so long, so complicated, or did it start of something simple that you did not expect where it would go?
Yeah, I had not a clue, honestly. My best friend offered me a one-way ticket to Europe and a bicycle when we got there, as long as I would just ride around with him wherever he wanted to go. I had no idea what his plan was. We had big dreams of sneaking into the pyramids at night and never ended up doing that. And the things that we ended up doing were very much determined along the way.
So what did this look like? And this was you spent was the whole time, and this was, keep me honest here, 5 or 6 years, was the whole time with your friend, or did he bail out at some stage?
So the book that I wrote is just about the first year, but the journey lasted for 6 years.
Wow.
Pedaled over 28,000 miles across 10 countries and 30 states. When we flew out to Schiphol outside of Amsterdam in 2006, I had no estimation of how long I was going to be on this journey. He did end up leaving after about 7 months when we were in Europe, and then we rode across the United States. He got his bicycle stolen at one point, so he took a bus back to our hometown, and I continued. And then the following adventures I started on my own or planned with other people. Generally speaking, everybody dropped out over a certain amount of time, but my perseverance and desire to keep going caused me to travel alone a lot.
So what kept you going? I mean, I'll call this bicycle life, like stealing from van life. I mean, it's something unique, right? I don't think I've ever heard anything like it. Your friend drops out, you're alone, you're at month number 8. What makes you keep going?
So the first time I didn't have any money. I literally couldn't fly home. I didn't have much of a choice. It also felt like the journey was incomplete.
Hmm.
There was more that I wanted to do. He and I said that we were going to go see the Mediterranean and that we were going to go south for winter. But by the time he left, it was the end of October, and we were in Edinburgh, Scotland, as far north as we had gotten, essentially, together. And I still had desires to see different places, to interact with more cultures. I had found a real sense of connection to the couch surfing community throughout my travels and really got great joy and found a sense of value in what I was doing. Whereas prior to me going traveling, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I had gotten really depressed over 10 months and had basically dropped out of society. Was playing video games for a living at a time when there was no money in it. And despite having gone to the first ever Blizzard convention or BlizzCon and won the first ever World of Warcraft international tournament, there was fun in that, but there wasn't purpose or meaning. And when I was living on the bike, I was giving back in a way that I'd never really gotten to be of service before. Even though I'd been raised in the Boy Scouts, became an Eagle Scout, did a lot of volunteering and contributing to my local community, this was different. It was exhilarating. And there was a sort of adrenaline junkie side of getting the endorphins of riding 100 miles every day that really did fuel the continuation of the journey.
What was the moment slash experience, if you can kind of describe it to us, where you were like, oh, there's value, there's mission, there's purpose in what I'm doing. When did that light bulb turn on for you?
Yeah, we stayed at a community in the very western edge of Germany, right against the Netherlands border, that had a very unique and interesting group of multicultural people that came from all kinds of places, and we stayed there for 5 months. And my best friend had done a social experiment where he told this community that he was mute. Not that he didn't want to talk the entire time that he was there, but that he was mute. And that we had an agreement where if we wanted to be fed, we would work. And my buddy, he loved to fast. So he would go for several days or a week at a time, not working at all, and just riding around and going and seeing the countryside, while our other travel companion, he and I were in the fields, day in and day out, heavy labor, lots of planting and weeding and cultivating new crops and getting rid of unwanted things, tending to goats. And when we left, the community actually had a departure ceremony. And within that ceremony, people went around the room saying their farewell piece. And people gave us gifts and money that we didn't expect at all. And a couple of the people spoke to this part of that we helped them have enough food to get through the next winter. That without just the two of us, they were lacking kind of young, able bodied, hard workers, that they didn't think they were going to be able to make it just through that winter. And that we literally provided them with the sustenance for life for their community to make it another year. And that had such a heavy impact on me and created such a profound sense of what I do matters and that my actions make a difference for people. And it was that moment that I really got the motivation to not only keep going, but to put my best efforts into everything that I was doing.
How did that change your trajectory or kind of decision making for the rest of the trip? Did that change how you decided you want to spend the rest of the time?
It gave me more energy at every single community that we visited after that. It caused me to want to spend more time being of service than just gallivanting around on our metal steeds and living this really hedonistic vagabond life that was a major part of the initial allure. Not only did I want to go and really have these fun, life oriented experiences that brought me personal transformation and catharsis, but that everywhere I went, I found myself with the mindset of how can I make this place better? How can I contribute to this community? And I would clean up trash as I went, or I ended up donating food that I was dumpster diving to people that I met along the way, that whenever I was couch surfing with somebody, it wasn't just like, oh, free place to stay. Great. What can I take from these people? It was, how can I give to these people? How can I bring more value than I'm getting back?
My biggest criticism of the way all of us honestly travel is that we really don't connect to the place, right? We don't learn about the culture, the people. It's kind of this sanitized experience. That is not what you went through.
Yeah.
What are the things that you learned? Is there anything where you had an interaction that you can recall where you just kind of rethought your life experience or rethought the things that you know to be true and you're like, well, maybe it just ain't so.
So what you referred to is tourism. It's people being tourists. It's taking from a place. It's not really delving deep within the culture and interacting with it. And to answer your question, what you talked about happened consistently. That took place over and over again. I rethought about my basic assumptions for how to live. I was able to gain a very global perspective. And every new country that I traveled in, I got more and more and more out of the culture. I understood what their values were and integrated those into my own life. And while I had already dropped out of consumerism or capitalism, every single place that I went had their own niche of what was important to them. And that continued long after I ended my bicycle journey, but continued to travel the world. Hiked Peru in 2016 doing the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. I spent 10 weeks in New Zealand with a little time in Australia. And in each new culture, what resonated with me was what brought them joy, what brought them enrichment, and what enmeshed local communities with larger regions and their nation as a whole. And so I got this really complete picture of what it takes to bring people together, create alliances or a sense of community and camaraderie, as well as the things that I took for granted coming from America, and how I can give back to my local cultures here with what I learned everywhere else in the world.
I love this topic of values. What were the maybe new values that you took upon to yourself through interactions with these individuals and communities?
Sure. So in the United States, a state away in Europe or many other places in the world is an entirely different country. And here, our neighbors are often very far away because beyond Canada and Mexico, countries are extremely far away from us, geographically speaking. We've got an ocean on either side and a very large country to the north and the south. And so people everywhere else in the world have this integration with a totally different culture right next to them that causes them to learn those people's values. It causes them to learn multiple languages and diplomacy. And there's a sort of reverence to what's different. It's an acknowledgement that there are people very close to me that are equally as human as I am, but that hold really different things of value. Let's say you're in France. You might not have the same attitudes as the Swiss about a passion for mountaineering or a love of chocolate and a stewardship of keeping nature in a really great place. Or, let's say you're the Netherlands and you've got a sea in between you and England, but you still know their language. You share a value for football in common, but that, clogs don't matter to them, and the way that you have festivals or days of celebration, your national holidays, are totally different, but you know that that other country has them, and that they're equally as important to you as it is to them. So these different values of culture come from history, and that we often, as Americans, don't really know the history of other countries very well. And yet, in other places of
Not
the
at all.
world, where countries are super close together, you know their histories. You gain insight and understanding as to why their values are what they are. And in many of these really close geographic regions, at some point in time, you had shared ancestors, whether they were the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Ottoman Empire, as a few examples. And so there's a sort of shared past that really kept a lot of these groups from holding on to conflict for long, despite whatever groups of temporary governing bodies, maybe inciting some really intense conflict a la World War One, Two, and so on into our history.
The, you, in essence, and keep me honest here, you were going in and out of different communities across different countries on a yearly, maybe sometimes monthly basis. Were you able to distill something fundamentally true about how communities function, are built, work effectively? What kind of makes for good community versus bad community? What are the things that you saw in common?
Yeah, regardless of where we went, when people came together to live together intentionally, it was very different than people who happened to live in a neighborhood together. Most of the time, when it's intentional, we get down to call it the base level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're providing food, safety, security, shelter, warmth, water in common. But there was also more of a desire to connect to the upper parts of the pyramid where you're looking to actively cultivate a sense of spirituality together. There's a greater commitment to personal growth. And when you start to really build into those upper layers in intentional communities, it ties people together much stronger than we're just meeting each other's needs on a survival level. I did compete in a reality TV show called Fight to Survive. It's available on Roku TV and the CW. And in that game, we definitely formed alliances that helped kind of nurture really deep, although temporary, bonds. While I do maintain friendships with some of the people since the show took place, in it, if you could provide water, shelter, food for somebody, that there was a real desire to keep that person around. And when you had that kind of thing within these intentional communities, you really had a depth of closeness that created bonds that lasted for longer and were deeper because you're not only looking out for each other's survival mechanisms, you're literally living together. So there's a sort of enmeshment there where you're involved in each other's daily lives. If somebody has a kid, you're involved in the rearing of that child in some way. And having these different aspects of overlapping interests, more than just neighbors who live next to each other. It was truly those extra layers that really kept things working. That despite the way the governing body of the community was structured, whether it was one person who was the owner and everybody else who just kind of resided there, or whether it was a total egalitarian foundation, that kind of stuff didn't matter as much. And the communities that weren't really looking out for each other's basic needs, if it was a community of volunteers who had a purpose of giving back to the community, but weren't sharing meals together, weren't drawing water out of a well or growing food, who weren't sharing domiciles in common, those communities weren't anywhere near as solid. And it was incredible to see the differences and the similarities between what worked and what didn't.
Is it, would you point as a primary factor that those shared experiences are what built the community? Or was there more to it?
Shared experiences, delivering this kind of establishment of common foundation, principles around caring for one another, but there was also this element of time that the longer a community had been established, the more likely that they were to be able to maintain longevity. communities that were just starting, who had only been together for months, there was a greater likelihood of a lack of conflict resolution, which led to community dissolution. It led to factions or cliques within a larger group that when those started to form, the greater community at large started to fail.
This is an incredibly interesting topic. What were the success practices or culture that were in place to help resolve disagreement? And maybe this is a separate question, but to prevent cliques, which are, keep me honest if you have a different description of
Mhm.
cliques, but they're basically forms of exclusion of different parts of the community.
True. So I'll address the clicks first, and then I may ask you to re-ask that first question. Clicks are naturally going to happen because within a larger community, you have an individual who wants privacy and private time,
Mm.
or there's a family who's going to look after themselves, especially parents looking after kids first. But there are ways to bring those things into harmony with the greater community, and it's asking for those cliques to interact with the other cliques as independent individuals. Let's say you have a meal prep that everybody gets to sign up for, that the community then asks for those clique members sign up to different meal prep sessions. So it's not just, oh, it's this family doing the same meal prep all together once a week. It's that the dad is on Monday and mom is on Tuesday. The kids are helping chop vegetables on Thursday and Friday, sort of thing. And they utilized a lot of community gatherings, whether it was around a fire at night over music and celebration, quarterly festivals of a bountiful harvest or a solstice celebration or just a monthly meeting to say, hey, what's working and what's not? How can we improve? And so I think I remember enough of your first question to really dive into that as well. Not Conflict resolution has a variety of models that are
Mm.
really healthy, that work very well. The ones that I personally like best are conflict resolution and what's called clearings. So you say basically like, hey, I want to clear this situation that we both might have some emotional tension or we're holding on to. Are you willing to do that with me? Great. Here's what took place when Fred accidentally whacked me with a shovel and you defended him saying like, oh, it was an accident. What took place for me was I saw that you were more of an ally with Fred than me. I saw you as taking sides and defending him instead of coming to my aid when I was looking for reassurance of safety and support. It felt like you divided us instead of brought us together. The story I told about you when this happened is that you value Fred more than me. That when there is conflict, I can't count on you for support. And the story that I created about me is that you don't value me very much, that I'm not of value, that I don't matter as much, or that I'm not worthy of your support and friendship. What you can count on me moving forward is to speak up right away, to let you know the kind of emotional response that I'm having to the effect that you had on me in that situation. What are you hearing me say? And then the person reflects back what they heard and what I can count on them moving forward. And then we consider that event cleared. That we don't then go back and 3 months later be like, well, you sided with Fred when he hit me with that shovel. That we let bygones be bygones and that we do these things on a fairly regular process or a regular schedule so that we're not holding on to things. And I forget the name of it, but there's a really beautiful event within the Jewish calendar where you look back through the entire year. You talk about the things that you still are holding on to. You air your grievances. You clear those things. You forgive the other person. And you move on.
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. Thank you. I'm so glad you know this. And truly, the element of forgiveness is one of the most powerful things that we can do as individuals to resolve conflict, move on, let go, and not have these emotional attachments that really tie us to our own feelings in a way that causes us to create a story. And I'm curious if you know what's the opposite of forgiveness.
It's a great question. Um, I wonder if it's about, I mean, we have this forgive and forget, right? So is the opposite of forgiveness not forgetting, or is the opposite of forgiveness um, holding a grudge, basically? I don't know. Good question.
You are very much on the right path. It is an attachment. And the very specific kind of attachment is blame.
Hmm.
If we're not forgiving someone, we're blaming them. And I only learned this really recently, so I'm really happy to continue to share this out in the world. There's accountability loops. Either we're going through a cycle of victimhood, or we're going through a cycle of responsibility.
So this is dangerous because this is a hot topic for me.
Go on.
And I feel like I did not solicit you in any way, but we
Not at
still
all.
got to it. Um, yeah, I'm a big believer in accountability and the absence of victimhood. But I don't want to. I don't want to tell my stories. Give me your perspective of how people can practice this abandonment of victimhood and go towards this accountability responsibility. What's the mindset? What's the framework? And what's the benefits?
So, like I mentioned, I still am pretty recent to learning this accountability loop. So it's not yet fully ingrained in me. But essentially, when a person is in victim, we don't take responsibility for our actions. We choose to blame someone else, hold a grudge, create a story about how we can rely on that person in the future, and essentially make up this belief system that it's not my fault, it's the other person's fault. So when this comes up again, I'm going to fall back on my self-righteousness, hold the other person accountable instead of hold myself accountable, so I can feel good about being right and stay in victim in order to do this sort of energy sucking or vampiric sort of process where I continue to pull energy from this other person so that I can feel good and not wrong. Whereas instead, if we're choosing responsibility and accountability, we can say, hey, this was what I did. This was my part in it. And I can forgive you for your part in it because it's easy to look at my own. And self-forgiveness is a part of this here. We can say, I can also choose to forgive myself because I'm operating off of these patterns that were ingrained in me since XYZ. I can recognize what came up for me are these specific emotions, and I can choose to feel into them. And instead of projecting my anger onto somebody else, and what I'm learning through emotional intelligence specifically is when we express anger, that activates the part of the brains. It's very much like having an endorphin and adrenaline rush. So when we express anger, we actually get more angry. Whereas when we express sadness, we allow that sadness to pass. And so the self righteousness of victimhood is very similar to anger. And so it causes us to get swept up into those emotions. Whereas responsibility, looking inward, being introspective, allows us to take a moment to go, wow, here's what's really underneath what's taking place for me. And very much nonviolent communication goes, when this happened, I felt this. And the request I can make from you moving forward is. And really, the unspoken part within nonviolent communication is, I forgive you for. And when we can go through those processes, not deeply internalize emotions and also not explode with our emotions,
Hmm.
we're expressing them in a healthy manner so that
So
the. Go ahead.
here's where I get stuck.
Sure.
We're telling these stories, and I would point out that these stories that we're telling about ourselves and about others are not necessarily always true,
Hmm.
or they may be a perspective of that story. In the clearing process, one side tells, I'm assuming, their perspective of the story about themselves and the other person. The other person is doing the same. Keep me honest here. If a contradiction emerges here, how do you move past that? Past the, oh, but in your perception of your story, you have blame. And in my perception of my story, I'm blaming you. And there's almost an impasse. How does this, let's say, mindset or the clearing process, have you seen it able to overcome that challenge?
So when you get to that level of challenge, and thanks so much for bringing it up because there are deeper tools here. If you feel like you're at an impasse with another person, one element of conflict resolution, it's not exactly conflict resolution, it's called co-counseling. It's essentially where you listen to the other person and have not necessarily a deadpan, but a non reactive, non response facial expression. And you allow the other person to sort of come to their own conclusions and do the sort of internal dialogue themselves. And you take turns doing this. 5 to 15 minutes is common, where you allow each other to speak. You simply hold space and allow them to process their experience and what they're going through without trying to reach a certain conclusion, without having an attachment to an outcome. If even this doesn't work, there are some really great prompts out there within conflict resolution communities, co-counseling communities that are really great. This also starts to bridge into the realm of mediation and facilitation, where you're not doing this alone. You're bringing in an unbiased third-party mediator or facilitator who can help you get through these things. Coaches, psychologists, or psychotherapists are really stepping in to this realm where people need help. We often lack the tools to be
Hmm.
able to go through these things in a manner where we're not attached to an outcome, where we're
This is
really able to hear and listen.
this is really hard stuff. I mean, it's not tools that you're born with, and I would argue in many cases you don't get them from your parents or even schools. I had a transformative experience with actually a boss of mine, and I came in huffing and puffing, and the customers saying this, that, and this and that, and there all these defensive mechanisms came in. And what was super interesting is this manager, he took every item that I said and almost wrote it down mentally on a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, okay, the customer is saying X. Is this true or false? And we thought through it together, and it's like, yes, it's true. And then he went through the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth item. And together, even though we're like on the defensive here, like it's attack against us, we together through this process came to the conclusion, well, actually, every single item is true. Like, it is not a lie. It is not dishonest. It is not unfair. And then finally he said, well, can we understand his perspective considering all of this information that we mutually consider to be true? And it was such a slap in the face because by the time I was done with this process, I was like, why am I so upset? And obviously the answer is clear. It's because there was a sense of a personal attack here because to a certain degree I was representing the company in front of this customer. So the
Hmm.
psychology suddenly became clear, but I was like, oh, I would be upset if I was this customer. And
Yeah.
that built a sense of empathy.
Yeah.
It was such an extraordinary process. And it's kind of, you're bringing me back to, just going back to the basics and understanding what are those stories we're telling? What are the stories the other side is telling? What is our perception and their perception? And our perception is not necessarily the same as their perception. And just understanding that can make a huge difference.
Indeed.
Nathaniel, believe it or go
Yeah,
ahead, go
our
ahead.
our perception is almost never the same as their
Yeah, this is
perception.
true. This
Having
is true.
compassion and empathy goes a really long ways.
There's actually scientific research around this, and it's called egocentric bias. And what it
Hmm.
basically means is that human beings by default assume that the people around them have the same incentives, cultures, and wants as you yourself do. Obviously, that's completely wrong. But that's how we make decisions, right? This
Hmm.
has kind of been, let's say, psychology and scientifically proven, which is driving a lot of this. Nathaniel, this is, believe it or not, we're way out of time. Um, I promised 30 minutes of recording, and we're beyond that. Um, this is a difficult question because it's a personal and private one, but we've done a fair share of that today,
Hmm.
so it shouldn't be hard for you. If you had to go back to 20-something-year-old Nathaniel, what would you tell him?
Yeah, I've actually thought about this one before, and if I were to go back in time and talk to that 20 something version of myself, I would encourage him to listen to his intuition, to believe in himself, and to allow the challenging and difficult experiences to be fun. What if it was fun? To find even more curiosity in pain, misfortune, disappointment, in knowing that he's not going to be in control of everything, but he can learn to be more in control of his response. That things outside of ourselves are going to happen, that we're going to have terrible headwinds, that we're going to have flat tires. And how we choose to respond to these things totally frames our experience of it. Because we can throw our hands up in the air and go, yes, another flat tire, 12th one today, woohoo! Or we can go, God, freaking, God, it's just stupid. I'm sick of this. I'm tired.
I noticed with my wife when we kind of think back on our shared journey, the worst things that have ever happened to us were the moments that built the most of a bond, and they're the stories that we most enjoy retelling,
Hmm.
right? It's the cockroach hotel with the toilet that could barely stand up straight, with the bugs under the sheets, where they told us it would be a supreme breakfast, and it was like barely edible. Those are the stories we look back on fondly. So I would extend your point, and I would say not only is it, those are the moments that are building your character.
Hmm.
It's also the moments that are building the bond between you and the people around you.
Yeah.
And the whole difference is between how you treat them and how you treat the other people around you in that moment of pain.
Yeah.
Um, that deeply, deeply resonates with me. Nathaniel, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been an absolute delight. I appreciate you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'll encourage all of your listeners to embrace hardship as a choice, that the growth happens during moments of discomfort, that there is all kinds of programs out there for emotional intelligence training. I went through one called Next Level Trainings last year. If I hadn't gone through that, I don't have no idea how long it would have taken me to publish my book. called The Cycle of Kindness. I'm currently working towards creating a nonprofit to help spread kindness throughout the world. I'm in the process of developing an app. So if anybody out there knows how to do that and they want to be a part of bringing more kindness into the world, they can reach out to me. Your listeners can find more out about my book at thecycleofkindness.com. I also happen to be a circus entertainer. I own a
That's true.
company, Cirque Quirk. I also sell my artwork and photography, Allenby Art, on social media. And I'd love to bring some more value to this by sharing some of the diagrams and the infographics with you and your listeners, Ari. Perhaps you can blast them out via an email so that people can start to do the work themselves. And perhaps I'll get to talk to you again. We'll do a follow up episode another time.
Yes. Nathaniel, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you. This was a
Ari,
pleasure.
it's an honor and a pleasure. Blessings upon you.